thank you for coming along to the session, of course, right? And of course, Yanni, thank you for organizing the event and having me on. And I guess worth calling out that I am more excited than usual a little bit because after all, it is the Athens Power BI user group, right? From all places I've presented. But very much keen to share my knowledge today, everyone, on how that we can create reports that are more insightful by thinking about the things before we even touch Power BI desktop. I know this is the Power BI user group, but we will be doing the things we should be doing before we launch Power BI, right? So by the end of this session, I'm hoping everyone walks away with some strong tips, right, on how to approach reporting before we access the application Power BI, right? And it's also important to call out, I guess, right? I'm not going to demo any Power BI today. In fact, I'm not even going to show a Power BI screenshot, but please, I am doing this purposely. Why am I doing this purposely? I find that we spend too much time on designing reports. I find that we spend too much time on developing reports, and we don't spend enough time in trying to understand what is the business value we hope this reporting solution is to offer, right? So I'm purely going to focus in on understanding how do we gather, how do we collect the business requirements to put us in the best position to then move on to create more insightful reports afterwards. Everyone, was I mute on all this
Good.
time?
It's only you.
Okay.
Welcome back. We can hear you again.
Okay, good. What's going on there? That's very weird. Okay, but just a quick intro to me all. I'm not going to spend too much time here, I promise. My name is Lazaros Viastikopoulos, but everyone calls me Laz, right? Very much I focus on everything, anything front-end analytics. That's where all my experience and a lot of my knowledge lies, right? So I very much enjoy working on projects that help gather the business requirements to make sure they align back to the business strategy, the business objectives. I very much enjoy putting bespoke training packages for different organizations to upskill the workforce to use Power BI. And more so, where would you find me on what types of projects? You'll find me helping organizations on the Power BI adoption journey, right? As of now, I'm the Power BI practice lead at an organization called Adatis. And if you don't know who Adatis is, well, they're an advanced AI and data analytics consultancy. And it's also worth calling out, we're now part of Telefonica Tech, right? In regards to my keen subjects or my passion subjects, I should say, they're definitely data storytelling, as well as breaking into the world of data visualization. But why? I very much enjoy working with people. I very much enjoy trying to understand what's the problem, why are we trying to overcome it, and where are we trying to go? And of course, the other one is everything data governance, making sure we set the foundation up, making sure we put the right guardrails in place for Power BI to create an environment that does align to organizational policies, but empowers the users. Because after all, that's what Power BI is there for, is to empower the business user to answer their own business questions as well, right? And one more random thing, I like to always say something non-work related. It's probably the nerd in me coming out. I love to collect Pokemon cards, right? And I have a Power BI solution coming out around this pretty soon as well. So if you have me on LinkedIn, you'll see it. But anyway, that's a quick intro to me all, right? Feel free to add me if you have any questions and you don't feel comfortable voicing your opinion here or calling out. Feel free to add me. Always happy to answer them afterwards as well. Okay. So with that said, let's get into the agenda, everyone. So we will start off with a short introduction to what is data storytelling. But here's the thing, I don't want to spend too much time here, right, on what is data storytelling. I think we should all have somewhat of an idea. I find the more common question is, okay, Laz, we know what data storytelling is, but where do we start from? Where do we begin, right? That's what we're going to explore here. We're then going to go ahead to answer the question of why should you care, right? And the way we're going to answer this question of why should you care about data storytelling, we're going to see some very common challenges that I find and how data storytelling helps us avoid them. We're then going to move into measuring the return on investment. Now, I'm sure we all have an idea of how do you measure the ROI, the return on investment for a report. But what we're going to do, we're going to look at some things Gartner has said in the past, and I find so much truth to as well. So we're going to go ahead and explore that. We're then going to look at the 4 things we should be doing before we launch our BI desktop, right? Before we do anything technical, any design work, what are the 4 things we should be doing? And then everyone, to bring it all together and summarize, we're going to explore the 4 parts of a compelling data story with a bit of an example as well, right? So I do have questions at the end, but like Yanni said, feel free to put the questions in the chat. Feel free to stop me and happy to answer questions as we go on as well. Okay. So let's start off with the basics. What is data storytelling, everyone? In summary, data storytelling, you've probably seen this diagram. If you go on Google, it's the first thing you'll see, right? But it's a good summary. It's taking the data, it's taking the visuals, it's taking the narrative, right? The narrative, and bringing it all together through an easy to understand report, right? But here's the thing. Okay. When I have these conversations with clients and other people in the community that, okay, we understand storytelling, but how do we start? I always say this. We start off with the business objective or the business challenge we are trying to overcome. So in other words, let's really focus in on where are you trying to go, and that there will be the starting point, right? And I know it might just sound easy me saying this, but as we go through the slides and we go through the 4 parts of a story, you'll see how this is front and center, why we should always start off with this here, right? And of course, through data storytelling, right, our solutions will naturally become more memorable. They will become more engaging. They will become more persuasive. And hopefully, they will promote more actions. Correct? After all, that's what we all want to build, right? We want to build a reporting solution that is genuinely actionable. And this is why I find storytelling so helpful. It helps us, or it makes us think, how do we make sure we add the right information onto the canvas to promote more action to the end users as well? And we'll see this come to life afterwards. Okay. So look, we now understand what data storytelling is, right? The visuals, the data, the narrative, bringing it all together for an easy to understand report. We also briefly saw, where do we start from? Start with a business objective or the business challenge you're trying to solve. But another question I usually get is, why should I care, right? Why should I put extra time, extra effort in data storytelling when all I can simply do is ask the end users, hey, what do you want and how do you want to see it? Or maybe show me an existing report and let's start from there, right? Well, I find it usually, not always, but very much usually leads to the following result. Yep. So let me walk you through this. I made it a bit more fun. It always starts off with that wow moment. I'm sure you've all been there. If you design and develop reports, you give the report to the end users. That wow, right? When we first introduce it, everyone loves it. Everyone is excited. Everyone can't wait to start using these reports, right? They're so excited. They can't wait to come in on Monday morning just to start exploring these new features and capabilities. Everyone loves a bit of new tech, right? That's the first phase, I like to say, when we release a report. We then go into that steady use phase, which is the second one, right? Maybe after a week, some people are still using the report, right? People are coming to ask, they're asking questions about the report. That's always a good sign, right? If they're asking questions. We then maybe go into the report usage logs. Okay, we can see people are still accessing the report, right? But then we go into the maybe, I don't know, the second week, and then we start seeing, well, less people are asking questions. We go into the report usage logs to try and understand what's happening, but something is missing, right? The usage is declining as well. And that's when we go into the bin stage, everyone, right? That's what I like to call it. I've been here too many times, right? It's not the nicest of feelings. And if you haven't been here, congrats, you're probably a better designer and report developer than I am, right? But in all honesty, if you've been developing reports for a long time, you've probably come here. The users of the report have now gone back to what they were using previously. Maybe it's an Excel spreadsheet, maybe it's an extract from SQL, who knows? However, what they were hoping to get from this report is no longer offering it to them. So from our side, all the time, all the effort we've put in has gone wasted, right? And here's the thing, everyone. This is why we should care about data storytelling, right? This is why we should approach a data storytelling methodology. I find data storytelling helps us avoid a common set of challenges that usually leads us to binning our reports. Now, I'm keep saying binning our reports. What do I actually mean, everyone? Two things: reports that are underutilized and reports that are not adopted, right? So let's now actually explore it in a bit more detail. Okay, so what are the challenges that I find data storytelling helps us avoid? And before I explain these as well, it's worth calling out. I regularly ask the question, what are your challenges when you gather requirements? I regularly ask people, what are your challenges when you design and develop reports? And at the end of 2023, we also hosted some data storytelling events. And we asked this to the audience as an interactive quiz. And surprise, surprise, these are the genuine challenges people are finding, right? But let's just go through each one. The first one, the audience does not know what they want, right? How does data storytelling help us avoid this challenge? Well, it offers us structure. It offers us an approach to asking the right questions to help the audience articulate, to help them explain what they need. Now, please don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying simply the audience does not know what they want. No, they know what they want. They're the best people to know what they want, right? They understand their job roles, but it's our job to help them articulate the business requirements onto a reporting canvas, right? We need to help them by asking the right questions and facilitating the right workshops to extract this information out. And storytelling helps. The other one, come on, I'm sure you've all been here. Audience asks for everything, right? And how does data storytelling help us avoid this challenge? You'll see it when we go through the example, right? What did I say on the first slide? Where do we start from? We start from the business objective or the challenge. If you start from the business objective, everything else you collect has to directly impact that business objective, right? So it helps us funnel down all the other information that really we don't need, right, for this solution. Maybe we need it for another solution, but not this solution, right? And that's why storytelling helps us avoid this challenge. The other one, the audience asks us to rebuild an existing report. I think it was like maybe a month ago, maybe a bit over. I had this scenario again, right? Where, hey, we have this report. Can you just rebuild it in Power BI? Why? Why should we rebuild something exactly as it is? ask those why questions. Storytelling makes us ask the why question. And then that why question then goes into the value. What value are you getting from this report? We're happy to spend the time and the money on it, but is it genuinely giving you some value back? And that's what we need to be focusing on. And the last one there, the audience does not provide any KPIs, or they provide too many KPIs. And this one is such a common challenge, everyone, right? How does data storytelling help us? Well, really, when we go down the data storytelling approach, one of the parts of a story is, well, where are you trying to go? That's the first part. The second part is, how do you know if you're on target to the objective? Those are the KPIs. It forces you to have KPIs. But also, you might be in a scenario where you collect KPIs and they say, well, we have these 30 KPIs for this one report, right? If you start off with a single objective, it's easier to prioritize and narrow down the KPIs that impact that objective. And then if there's still too many, when I run workshops around data storytelling, you will know the workshop is going well because naturally people will start prioritizing actually the KPI 1, 2, and 4 impact the goal the most. And that's how we narrow it down afterwards as well. Yep. Now, here's the thing. I find that if you try to avoid these challenges, you will automatically avoid the following challenges in many cases. Because if you think about it, the first set of challenges I highlighted, what are they? The requirement gathering challenges, right? And again, if we try to resolve these ones, they will have a knock-on effect on helping us resolve the other ones as well that you can see on screen. So in other words, reports with no true purpose. So in other words, they don't link to a business goal or a business objective. And I always ask people, or I always tell people, go to your organization, whether you're a consultant or an in-house person, have a look at your reports and ask, what is the purpose here? Yep. The other challenge it helps us avoid is reports pushing people through continuous and endless analysis and scrolling and drill throughs and drill downs non-stop, right? The other one I always find, reports that don't promote action. And just a few more to call out, everyone. Reports that are way too busy, right? And why are reports too busy? Because we are trying to satisfy too many audiences' needs. And if there's one thing I would want everyone to take away is how we approach an audience. And I'll highlight that a bit more later on, right? And the last one I put on there is one of my favorites, reports that incorporate requirements that were gathered in advance by the wrong audience, right? Such a common challenge I find. So hopefully, everyone, we are now starting to understand how data storytelling can help us advance our reports. How? By helping us avoid these common set of challenges that I regularly find. Yeah. Okay. So here's the thing. We now understand what data storytelling is. We also understand why we should care. However, there is one more thing, right? There's one more reason why we should care about data storytelling, but I wanted to give it more focus because it's all about measuring the return on investment. And I think that's an important topic. Yeah. So let's explore how we would measure the value of a report, or how would we measure the return on investment of a report, right? I guess traditionally it would always be to simply go into Power BI, right click on the report, look at the report usage metrics and see how many people are accessing the report. In fact, when I ask this question several times, how do you measure the value of a report? There's two answers usually. The first one is, it's very easy, Laz. Everyone can measure the value of a report. Just look at the report usage logs. Or the other answer I get, and this is the one I'm more interested in, is actually it's quite challenging to measure the value of a report. So let's just go ahead and see how many people are accessing it instead. But here's the thing, everyone. People viewing the report does not drive up the return on investment, right? It's what we do with the data. It's not how many times we view the data. That's what we should be really focusing on. What are we doing with the data? That will tell us whether all the money and the effort and the time we put into building these solutions is worth it in the first place. Yep. Okay, so on that, let's see two things that Gartner has said that relates to this. But before we do, just very quickly, it's very important to call out. I've taken these came from the Gartner Data Analytics Conference 2023. And a lot of them were referencing data analytics projects as a whole, right? Not just dashboarding and reporting, data analytics projects as a whole. But I find so much truth in this in reporting as well. Okay, but feel free to go through the links. But anyway, one thing that they called out that really stuck with me is that most data analytics leaders are struggling to articulate the value they deliver in business terms, right? So in other words, it's becoming hard to measure the return on investment, right? And again, from my experience, I can see this in dashboards and reporting and front-end analytics. Yep. Also, very interesting, Gartner predicted that data stories as opposed to dashboards will be the most widespread way of consuming analytics by 2025. Okay, so I thought, let me give these two things there. And with these two things in mind, let's have a look at this, right? So these here were taken from the Super Data blog. Very good place to read up on new and interesting things. And again, they came from the Data Analytics 2023 conference. Okay. Now, let me quickly explain what these are. They are quadrants, so they've definitely come from Gartner, right? One of them shows the more tactical elements, all right? That should be linked to our reports, projects, to our reports to measure the return on investment, right? So think of these, the tactical ones, think of these as your more classical elements, your more traditional things that should be assigned to our reports, such as, did my report lead to more sales, right? On the other side, we have the strategical elements that should be linked to our reports to measure the return on investment. And these are the more long-term, the more long-term financial influencing elements rather than the direct financial elements that you can see on the left-hand side. So here's the thing. Gartner said we should be trying to assign one of the more strategical elements to our data analytics projects, right? And I'm thinking of this from a reporting perspective. Here's the thing. I find that most times we don't even link one of the more tactical elements to our reports, let alone one of the more strategical ones. And please don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying our reports don't tell us if revenue is going up or if revenue is going down. What I'm saying is it's harder, it's a challenge to say this report was the reason we have more sales or it helped us generate more sales instead. Yep. So what I'm suggesting is let's at least try and assign one of those more tactical elements to our reports to measure the return on investment before we even start thinking about those strategical elements. So to answer the question of why should we care again, why should we care about data storytelling, everyone? Well, data storytelling helps us measure the return on investment for our reports. And when we go through the next sections of the 4 parts of a compelling story, you will see I always like to start off with the business objective. That business objective should be linked back to one of these business elements in the organization. For your organization, it might be different. It could be increased revenue, it could be increased productivity, it could be decreased costs or mitigate risks. Every organization might have different ones, but the point is, when we set an objective for our reports, let's try and make sure it fits into one of these business elements that's important to us. Yep. Okay. I'm going to pause there. Any questions from anyone before we move on? No?
You can feel free to put it also in the chat.
Yep.
From my side, can you go one slide to the back?
Sure. Yeah.
Just to, I mean, I can also do it. I love this thing. I just learned something new today.
Yeah, you can see the end of it as well now. But yeah, one step back. There we go.
So, like, I understand the concept here, but I think you mentioned it also before. Do you want to share with us how actually do you get access to that kind of data, and how, I mean, you from your point of view and your job, you're working with clients, right? I guess they are challenging quite a lot that these report insights are reflected on the revenue going up, and this is like mutual way of seeing
Yep.
this thing. How do you actually reach to the data to back up your ROI of your dashboard or reports that you're making?
Yep. So just to make sure I understood, yeah, there's two things, right? Is it how we access the data that we need for this, or is it how do we derive the objective of the report?
No, it's how you as a
Yeah.
developer of the dashboard, you can say, you did this and that, A, B,
Yep.
for X, Y, Z. You decide, and it's part of it due to this report.
Yep. When we
And you
get to
can back it up with the data that obviously it's coming from the client in that case, right?
correct. When we get to the four parts of a story, it'll make more sense as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
But
Thanks.
one thing, since you called one thing I want to call out here as well, though, everyone, is when I do these sort of workshops, right, or when I have these type of conversations, I try to not talk about data or data availability on the first session as well, right? In fact, even if the data is not available and the first session, I don't care. I want us to think open and wide. Why do I do that as well? Previously, when we was doing this, we then found out, oh, well, we know we want to go to this place. This is the objective. And when I said we're not talking about data, we're not talking about features, we're not talking about we're going to talk about the business elements to this, right? We then even identified some data points that we weren't measuring against, that we weren't collecting, that we could be collecting as well. And that was in itself so valuable, right? But again, when we go through this, I try to leave technology and data out of it. Of course, naturally, look, there'll be a point where you have to get the data to build this thing, right? But that'll be a stage afterwards. But I want to call that out now. Yeah.
Sounds good. Thanks.
But okay, here's the thing. Okay, so just as a summary, so we saw what data storytelling is. We understood why we should care. We saw the challenges. We want to try and avoid these challenges, everyone, right? We saw some of the challenges that help us get to more insightful reports. And of course, we explored the importance of assigning a business element to one of our reports, having that objective, and that objective links back to one of those business elements. But now we're going to see the four things to be doing before we launch desktop. Yep. And here they are. Now, honestly, if there's one thing I would like everyone to go away with today, it's this here. It's please, please, please find the audience, right, that will be using the report. From my experience, the number one reason why reports fail and reporting projects fail is because you have been collecting the requirements from the wrong audience, right? And even if they don't fail, I'll tell you what's going to happen majority of the times, it's going to be more of a painful process, right? That's from my experience. Yep. So who do we collect the requirements from instead? This is what I find many times. We end up collecting the requirements from a group of senior people, a group of individuals in the organization that might have a little bit more influence, right? And they think they understand the pain points of the end users, of the audience, but truthfully, they don't grasp the day-to-day challenges they have. Yeah. So here's the thing. If for any reason I can't collect the requirements from the actual end users, I would raise it as a risk, right? On the flip side, this has happened many times. I find that you might be collecting the requirements from the right audience, but you might be collecting the requirements from too many audiences. And here's the thing, if we do that, I find that we then go down the path of creating reports that are out of focus, and really they don't have any sort of, they don't concentrate on a single element, right? And I've been here too many times as well, right? If we try to collect too many requirements from too many audiences, you will have overly complicated reports. Yep. So my general rule on this all is this: I try limit it to 2 audiences, right? And if I do have 2 audiences that I collect requirements from for one report, before I start collecting the requirements, I sort of have like a mini session to see, well, do they have a common purpose, right? Because if it's one from one department, one from a completely different department, they all have separate KPIs, they all have separate objectives. If you try to bring them together and create one canvas, you're not going to satisfy any of them, right? So one of the most important things, again, before you launch Power BI Desktop to start creating report, make sure you talk to the actual audience you'll be creating reports for. Yep. The next one, identify the return on investment, right? So again, before I open up a Power BI solution, this is what I always do. I ask myself, where am I trying to go? Where are we trying to go with this solution that we're putting in? And this now goes back to what I said about those elements. Am I trying to increase revenue, mitigate risk, increase efficiency, decrease expenses, etc., etc.? How does it fit back into the wider business objectives? Who am I asking this report from, or who's asking for this report? Apologies, right? And from my experience, again, I find that too many times we simply just run away with a set of tasks that were given to us, and we don't stop for a moment and say, what is the value we're looking to deliver here, right? And like I just said now, when we talk about the return on investment, no data, no technology talks for the first session. Really just focus on the business story. Once you have the business story, you can't move on to the next stage, which I'll tell you later, which is to the design. You need to understand what data is available as well, right? And to give an example, I was in a workshop in the past for storytelling, and I needed to collect the requirements from the audience, which was, I believe, was between 4 to 6 people. Yeah. I ended up having 25 people in that workshop. Yep. And a lot of them were data engineers, people from networking, BAs. And in reality, I need to collect the requirements from that small handful of people, right? I'm sure you can imagine how that workshop went. It didn't go too great. Yeah. Why? Because also I was trying to focus on identify the return on investment. So when we was talking about KPIs, because I had this larger audience that was more people than the people that will use a solution, I will talk about KPIs and, oh, Laz, have you seen the goals or the metrics capability in Power BI? Should we not be used? No, we don't want to talk about the features and the capabilities. Push that to the side. We're just focusing on why have you got challenges, right? What keeps you up at night? What do you need to do every Monday morning? That's what I want to focus on in the first sessions, nothing else. Yep. So really derive the return on investment. The other thing, everyone, ask why. Ask why. I'm sure you've all been here, right? Laz, I want to ingest the last 5 years worth of data, even though we don't want to do any sort of trending analysis. We just want to have this year versus last year. I want the last 30 KPIs I gave you. For these 30 KPIs, Laz, can you give me versus last year, versus forecast, versus target? And also, Laz, no one wants to access it in the Power BI service. Send it out to them every day by email, PDF, please. Why would we do this, right? So ask these why questions as much as possible. What I always find is this: if we ask why questions, we can better tailor our solutions to the audience's genuine needs. And here's the thing. The way I also explain this is the client, because I work with clients, of course, or for you, maybe if you're an in-house person, right, your stakeholder group, they don't want our time for us to simply say, hey, look, everything is amazing. They're asking for our time so we can give genuine recommendations and genuine advice on how to create a more insightful report. So again, don't feel intimidated to ask those why questions. That's the point I'm making here. Okay, we then come on to tell a story, everyone, which is where we're going to spend a lot more time on, right, to finish up the session for today. And if I had to summarize this briefly, what do we mean by tell a story before launching Power BI Desktop? We are going to put together a storyboard. The storyboard will have the requirements that we embed inside the report. It's the stage before we do any wireframes or any design. Before you use a tool like Figma, if you use Figma for wireframing, we have a storyboard in place. Think of it as your blueprint. Yeah. And the other thing I just want to call out, everyone, before we get into it, I guess, is this. I've gone through various different approaches over the years, right? Because I wanted to get closer to creating solutions that offer more insights and where I can say they are offering value, right? Some very good people out there, Cole Nussbaumer, Andy Kirk, Miko Yuk is someone I very much follow as well, Stephen Few. They all have very, very good data storytelling approaches. My recommendation is this. Take these approaches, have a look at them, right? However, make sure you trial them yourself. Change them around a little bit to fit your character. Why do I say this? Because I've been running these workshops, right? I'm a character that likes to work in a particular way. I'm a character that likes to ask some questions, but I don't like to ask other questions. I like to approach people in some ways, right? So the point I'm making is find these approaches, learn from these approaches, but then trial them yourself and make them fit your character. As long as you're getting the same end result, it would work and it will take you closer to achieving insightful reports. Okay. So let's now go ahead and bring this together by exploring the 4 parts to a compelling data story. And like I said earlier, everyone, I like to keep stuff a bit more fun. So let's start it off. We got 4 parts to a compelling data story. We start off with a mission. We start off in a future town, let's call it Alexandria. And the mission was very clear. We must increase our sales by 10% by the end of the financial year. That's our mission. The radar, what's the radar? Think of it as a high-tech tool that helps us track our KPIs like average transaction value, and it shows us when we are off target. The villain, a group of unmotivated salespeople. And these salespeople are causing the average transaction value to drop down, right? And Alexandria is desperate for a solution, and that's when the hero comes into place. So who's the hero? This person comes along with a training manual and helps train the unmotivated salespeople into enthusiastic sellers, helping them to upsell, cross-sell, and engage. So that there is our 4 stories. And as you can see, I did bring it to life a little bit through superheroes because I enjoy this stuff, right? But let's now make it a little bit more relevant to our world as well. But I'm sure you'll remember now, there's 4 parts: the mission, the radar, the villain, the hero. What is this? The mission is your purpose. That's the first thing we collect, and we'll go into more details, right? The radar, they're your KPIs. That's the second part of a compelling data story. Your villain are your causes. Think about it. Your villain, unmotivated salespeople, they're holding you back from achieving the green KPI. And then your hero, hopefully we can see, are the actions. What are the things we can do to fix the cause? And if we fix the cause, the KPI will go from red to green and it will bring us closer to our purpose. Okay? So let's now take this step by step. I'm going to have a glass of water. If anyone has any questions before we get into it, let me know. Okay, so let's start off with the purpose, everyone. There we go. Right at the beginning, throughout this presentation, I've always been saying, identify where are you trying to go. And this is an example that I did previously with a group of regional managers. Yep. After a lot of back and forth discussion, right, and a lot of talking, I simply asked, look, guys, what's keeping you up at night? And they said, simply, Laz, hitting our targets. That's it. And after a bit more conversation, we said, okay, look, we need a report to help us increase our sales by 10% by the end of financial year 2024. I've summarized all this to be able to fit it, make it more clear, right? Now, think about it. Do we want to create reports where we can measure the return on investment? If we have that single purpose, and here's the thing, we should try and make it measurable, right? If we make it measurable, we know if we're moving towards it or we know if we achieved it. Hence the reason it's easier to understand or easier to measure the return on investment as well. Yep. And again, always to call out, try and make this as measurable as you can. In some cases, you might not be able to, but I promise you, it will already put you on the path to creating more focused reports as well. Yeah. So when I run these sessions, this is what I do. I have this on a board, right? Everyone has to be able to see what I'm writing down as well. So we start off with increased sales by 10% by the end of financial year 2024. Yep. Front and center. Once we have this piece of information, everyone, that's when we move to the KPIs. And yes, a KPI, it has to have a target, or it has to have an actual versus some sort of target. Otherwise, it's not a KPI. Yep. So here now we ask another set of questions compared to the first one, right? So for this report, increase sales by 10% by the end of financial year 2024. I like to ask many times, if you arrive in the office on a Monday morning and someone comes to you and says, listen, you're going to present to the board and you're going to give them an update on how close we are to achieving our target, what's the first KPI you need to see? That usually puts people in the mood. That's when we start collecting, okay, well, it's sales, Laz. Sales versus what? Versus last year. Okay. Does sales versus last year impact increased sales by 10%? And by the way, stay with me. Many people say, of course, it's sales. I ask this for a reason, though. I then go down and say, okay, what other KPIs do we need to track? Average transaction value. Okay. Does it genuinely impact the purpose? It does. How? Well, the reason and how is if we increase the transaction value, we get more sales, Laz. Hence, we are going closer to our purpose. Okay, I'm happy with that one. We then go to the next KPI, which they said conversion percentage. How does this impact the purpose? But the reason I'm keep asking this question, everyone, is for this. You're going to end up getting a lot more KPIs. If we can't answer, how does it impact the purpose? I then put it onto a back burner list and I say, I feel like this should not be here, right? And we try and collect only KPIs that directly impact that individual purpose because we're building this for a single report. Yep. Now, I can see I'm running out of time. I know we started a bit late, but I'm going to whiz through it a bit. Yeah, this is okay. We go over 3 minutes a little bit. Is that okay?
I think it's totally fine. Yeah.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not going to rush too much. Okay, good.
Take your time.
Perfect. So here's the thing. We collected the KPIs, right? Sometimes I get the answer, oh, well, as we can just simply increase the canvas size. No, we should not increase the canvas size. Think back to people like Stephen Few, right? Keep everything at a glance. We don't want to just increase the canvas size to pack everything in there as well, right? So again, always remember, we start off with some questions, we collect the purpose. We then ask another set of questions, and these directly impact that purpose there. Think of it very much as a peel and onion approach. You can't go to the next stage unless you have the first one. Yep. And the other thing I want to call out, by running these in practice, this is what happens, right? When you put these things on a, by the way, I run them using Miro. If anyone's used Miro before, it's a great tool to run things like this, or in person as well. You can set this up beforehand, right, with a few sticky notes as well, and it works good. Yeah. But the point I was making is this. if you have the purpose in front of everyone, and if you have the KPIs and people are actually putting it on, everyone afterwards will feel a little bit more accountable as well. People will be like, okay, we've put this here. So when we move to actually designing and developing reports, people trust the data more as well because you included them from the start. That's what I find. Yep. Okay, so let's zoom in on this a bit more. Okay, so we know where we're trying to go. We know if we're currently on target. Let's say we are not on target, right? Let's say that the average transaction value is in the red. So these are the questions, by the way, I ask to the audience. Let's say the average transaction value is in the red. Another tip to give you, sometimes I draw a fake KPI or Miro as well on the board. I say, okay, average transaction value is currently at £28. We're 4% down. It's red. What might be causing this? That's the third part of a compelling data story, everyone. What could be causing this KPI to be in the red? And that's where we collect various different types of information, right? So in this example here, it was low performing salespeople, right? There was a lot more, by the way. There was many more. I'm just cutting it down. But that was one of the core things they called out. The reason why ATV lads will be in the red is because salespeople in the shop floors are not cross-selling and upselling, hence the reason it's down. Okay, so we put that on the board. Yep. Once we have this information, by the way, we collect this information, everyone, for all the KPIs. So we do this for average transaction value. We then go to sales. Okay, let's say sales is in the red. Why is it in the red? What's causing it to be negative? That's what we put there, low performing stores. We do the same for conversion. You see how we do it for each one, right? Now, once we have the causes, everyone, that's when we move on to the most challenging part of collecting the story, the action. In other words, what can we do to fix it? And again, here's the thing I find, everyone. If we just collect the purpose, if we just collect the KPIs, if we just collect the causes, I feel that you already will be creating more insightful reports. I feel you will already be avoiding a lot of the common challenges that I mentioned at the beginning, right? But anyway, let's continue this journey. So let's zoom in on low performing salespeople. And again, have this on the board when you're doing it with people, right? So they can see what you're writing down as well. Everyone should be coming along with this as well. So low performing salespeople, what can we do to fix this? Well, one of the answers I got, well, we can offer some training, lads. Okay. Ask some more questions. Well, okay, is that it? Just okay, we can offer some training. Actually, it's a bit more complicated than that. What do you mean? How do you enroll someone on this training? Well, it's not one training, it's multiple training. We have one training for brand awareness, so they can understand our brand, our tradition, how the company started. We have another training where one of our sales execs teaches them how to upsell and cross-sell. And we have a third-party person that comes from outside, inside, on how to approach customers and close a deal. So already having this additional information is very valuable. And you'll see why when I close up with the next slide as well, right? But when we gather requirements, when we're building the story,